Okay. We should direct people where to go to sign up.
Like the website.
This is femmhouse.com.
Yeah, and then it's like the first thing.
Okay, cool.
Ooh, ah.
There we go. You're live. You're live.
Oh, great. Oh, great. Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Art of Synthesis, presented by FEMME House. My name is Giobbi.
My name is Minnie Bear.
We are so excited to be here today. We are going to go over the basics of synthesis. We'll probably get a little bit weird. Maybe we'll end up with some modular stuff. And we're really excited to also announce that we are launching today our FEMME House online curriculum.
The first course that we're launching is called Intro to Ableton Live, and the first class starts June 12th. So you can sign up at thisisfemmehouse.com.
Take it away, Minnie Bear.
Great. So thanks for joining us, everyone tuning in. I'm super excited to be talking about synthesis. Very passionate about synthesizers, and I love Moog. So very excited to demonstrate on the Grandmother and the Moog Matriarch. So what is a synthesizer? Well, an instrument that generates sound electronically typically allows you to control the sound's timbre, as well as how that sound changes over time. What's really cool about synths is you can create real-world instrument sounds as well as textures and specific sounds that don't necessarily have to be created by real-world instruments. So, for example, like otherworldly sounds. So we're going to be talking about certain concepts today, and in order for them to make sense,
You want to go to slide 2?
yeah, we want to go.
Slide 2, next slide. Oh, no, you're there now. Yeah, Papa's over there.
In order for these concepts to make sense,
Okay.
we need to talk about the properties of a waveform. And so, what is a waveform? Well, let's talk about sound. Sound is created by objects vibrating, and when those objects vibrate, those vibrations move through the air in the form of sound waves. So, waveforms are abstract representations of sound waves. And let's talk about the properties of a waveform then. So we have what's called amplitude, which is essentially the size of the vibration. And to put it simply, the size of the vibration determines loudness. So how loud the sound is, or how loud or how soft the sound is. And we measure loudness in decibels. And yeah, so basically if you see a really small waveform, right, sound's not going to be as loud. Waveform's taller, then we get a louder sound. We also have what is called frequency. And frequency is essentially a measure of how many times the waveform repeats in a given amount of time. So again, to put that simply, it's the speed of vibration. So the faster that a waveform is vibrating, the higher the frequency or the higher the pitch. Frequency is essentially pitch. And the slower the waveform, right, the lower the frequency or the lower the pitch. And we measure frequency in hertz, cycles per second. So for example, if we have 440 hertz, that would be 440 cycles per second, which by the way, is a 4. If we were to look at the keyboard. Cool, so yeah, in summary, we can adjust amplitude to make a sound quieter, make it louder, and we can also adjust frequency if we want to make a pitch higher or lower. So for example, on this guy here, and we'll talk about the different sections of the synth later on, but I can adjust.
You know what? Can we also just take a minute to make sure that if there's any, if her audio, if her voice volume is too loud compared to the synth, just let us know and we can make adjustments on the fly since we're live.
Yep, we can't hear what you hear, basically. Yep, so again, we'll be talking about the different parts of the synth, but I can essentially adjust the frequency and make the frequency higher or lower, which again is adjusting the pitch to make it higher or lower as well. Okay, so another way that we can describe sound is by its timbre. And timbre is essentially the sound quality or the character of a sound. So when we describe a sound as, let's say, dark, squishy, wet, abrasive, tinny. That's referring to its timbre. And when we talk about timbre, one way that we attribute timbre is harmonics, which harmonics are essentially frequencies that, this is a very fancy, I'm not sure why I worded it this way, but essentially they are multiples of the fundamental frequency. So for example, if I play a C on the keyboard, and we'll be talking about waveforms in a moment, but let's just say if I was playing a sine wave, then we would only be hearing a C, that fundamental frequency. And let's just say I'm a waveform that has harmonics that are present, then we would actually be hearing other frequencies that are present, not necessarily at as loud volumes as the fundamental frequency, but they are present. And again, we'll revisit this when we talk about waveforms, but just something to kind of keep in your brain. When we're talking about timbre, when we're talking about harmonics and how that relates to waveforms. Cool. So yeah. And then control voltage, CV, an electrical signal that's used to manipulate the values of components in analog circuits. So I do want to focus on the different parts of the synth so we can kind of jump in to sound design in a moment. So if you want to jump to the next slide, please.
Oscillator and waveform.
So oscillator, yeah, we're going to be talking about oscillators. Awesome. Cool. Thank you. So the oscillator section.
I'm just going to take a minute to say Xander is running all of this behind the scenes, and we're so grateful to him. Xander Wright.
Thank you, Xander. Yeah. Camera crew, operator, all of the above. Cool. So actually, is there any way to switch to overhead right now? Cool. So that way everyone can see everything that we're doing. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, let's jump into oscillators. Yes. So the oscillator section essentially will produce the fundamental sound or the raw sound that will go on to be shaped by the signal path or other parts of the synth. And the oscillation that happens itself here is the generation of waveforms that occur repeatedly, right? Measured in hertz. So again, we were talking about waveforms, and oscillator section will just have these repeating waveforms. And each sound that's generated by this oscillator section will sound different depending upon their shape or based upon their waveform. So if we take a look here, again, we were talking about frequency, which is pitch. So on this particular synth, the Matriarch, right, we have 4 different oscillators. So for each oscillator generating sound. And right now, this mixer section is going to determine how loud each oscillator is. Right now, I only have oscillator 1's volume turned up just so we can kind of hear things clearly and understand things clearly. So oscillator 1, if I turn this down all the way, right, we get this frequency, playing a C. Turn it up, goes up another octave. Turn it up again, goes up another octave. Turn it up once more, get up to another octave here. Right? Cool. So again, oscillator section is going to generate our raw sound and generates waveforms. So let's talk about the different types of waveforms.
Is it my turn?
Yes.
Okay, it's my turn. So, you guys, I didn't know that you'd be able to see my toes today, but yeah, that's me in the sliders. You know, so you have it. I didn't paint my toenails today. Xander, is there a way that I know I'm the one who told you to flip the camera, but we're being asked to flip it back around. So we're working on that, JS. Also, I liked your comment. Your amplitude is on spot. That was very cute. Okay, so we're going to start with waveforms. Pull my notes over here. So I'm demoing on the Grandmother and Mini Bear's on the Matriarch. And first of all, shout out to Moog for naming their synths in such cool ways. Also, there's drummer from another mother.
DFAM.
DFAM.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just really cool positive names, in my humble opinion. It's very FEMME House, if you will.
Very, very on brand. Yes.
Okay, so we're going to start with the sine. So Xander, if we want to go back to the overhead camera, I'm going to start with just one oscillator. So, well, let me take a step back. As Minnie Bear has been talking about, sort of the flow, the signal flow is usually oscillator, into filter, into envelope, into the output. Each synth varies a little bit. But when I first started producing music in the computer, I didn't have any synthesizers. And I was learning in software synths, and the layout of those is always a little bit different, but all of the synths always have these same parts. But once I got my hands on a hardware synth and was able to actually, visually see the signal flow, that sort of changed everything for me. So hopefully we can do that for you today. But as Lauren was saying, it starts with the oscillator. So this oscillator has triangle, saw, square, and pulse. Sine is also a waveform, and you can be a little bit cheeky because sine is not actually an option on this little knob over here. But if you go over to the filter section, you turn up the filter all the way and the resonance all the way. So now normally I would never say to turn up the resonance all the way because it can almost be painful to your ears. That's kind of like that squelchy, like if you're listening to acid music, the 303, that squelch. It's not made with this filter, but that the resonance is what's creating that. So normally I would say be careful as you turn that up, be careful for your ears. But in this case, if we want to hear a sine on the grandmother, we can't do it with this knob. You can sort of cheat and turn up the filter, go to 1-1 resonance, and this is sort of your sine wave, your basic sine shape.
And by the way, so remember how we were talking about harmonics? So again, sine wave is only that fundamental frequency, which is why it generally sounds super pure.
Yes, Lauren, yes. Speak nerdy to me.
Yes, love it. We love to see it, hear it.
Okay, so now we're going to go on to, let's go to square. So I'm on square here. This is the octave that the square is hitting at. I have just the oscillator 1 up. I'm going to turn my filter back down, my resonance back down. And this is the square. For me, I would say whenever I'm making a bass patch, when I'm producing music, I always start with the square. It just has like that warm, soft, full.
It's super round.
Yeah.
Yes, we want that round sound for our basses, right?
Yes. And you're hearing that a lot in house music and dance music. Let's just turn it down. See, already it's a bop. Okay, so then I'm going to go to the triangle. Let me turn this up a little bit. And this is the shout out to Dr. Dre. Those leads are that West Coast lead is made with a triangle. Shout out to Dr. Dre. Okay, now I'm going to go to the saw. Demoing that.
Yeah, so let's talk about the sound quality actually of each waveform because that will help us inform what we want to use for when we're creating sounds, right? So you mentioned like square, right? It's great for nice basses, right? Because they're super round sounding, right? So square waveforms are typically used for sub-oscillators. So, different synths will vary as far as like what features they have, but if a synth has say like a sub-oscillator, typically that will be a square waveform that's an octave down. But again, if you have multiple oscillators on a synth, you could basically just take, right, oscillator, take it an octave down. So same octave, down an octave. Then we can make it square, right? Which is nice.
Awesome. And then this, I would like the saw sound. We'll turn it up for a little. Feels like that's not right. I'm gonna add the second oscillator and detune them a little bit so they're not in sync. So they'll be slightly detuned. And doing that makes it a little bit fuller, wider. So you're perceiving that as like a sort of a bigger sound, which I I always associate the saw wave with Avicii, and I don't know if that's exactly fair, but like that kind of like that specific lane of dance music.
Because there's like unison thrown on there, which detunes voices, which makes the sound wider.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we want to think about like oscillator section, right? Think of like tuning frequency. So if we have two oscillators that are set at the same pitch, but then like one of those pitches is just like slightly off, then that's how we can get that like detuning, which again will allow for a little bit of a wider sound, which is really nice. Saw waves are also really nice if you're like, all right, cool, I want to make, you know, a brass instrument or like string instrument. Saw waveform is a really good waveform to start with.
Yes.
Nice and buzzy.
And then we have pulse. And so pulse wave is based on the same shape as the square wave. And 50% of the cycle is positive and 50% is negative, which means you will get the full tone of the square wave.
So it's either on or off. On, off.
But I think of that when I sort of am trying to categorize that in my mind, it's very much clumped together with the square wave.
And pulse wave?
Yeah.
So square wave is pulse wave. And so with pulse waves, you can actually change the width of the waveform. So we'll talk about modulation in a little bit, but basically if you have, let's just say, a square wave, let's turn down that, and right, and actually I'm going to make this pulse. So notice, we'll talk about modulation in a moment, we'll get there, but essentially we can change the width of that waveform. So notice how as I'm moving this, we get a thinner sound that moves to a wider sound. That sounds really nice, creates a lot of movement. I love modulating pulse waves.
Yes, talk dirty to me. Okay, so now we next slide, Xander. Oh yeah, and also just Lauren touched on this for a minute, but the octaves, you can pick which octave you want the sound in. The lower octaves have larger waves and the higher octaves have shorter waves.
More amplitude.
More amplitude. Okay, so I'm going to head over to the filter section. And this is where we shape the timbre and the color.
So we talked about timbre, right? Harmonic.
Here we are. So the filter, this is a very important knob in shaping your sound. So a low pass filter allows the lows through, whereas a high pass filter allows the highs through. So that's a way you can remember what that means. And as you close it, you're lowering the amplitude of the high frequencies. So let me just play a note. On drone, so you can. So I'm lowering the high frequencies, and I'm now letting them in as I turn it. Okay, so, and then we had the resonance knob, which we talked about. Will you play a note so I can?
Yeah. So someone wants to.
Yeah. What is resonance? Resonance is it emphasizes the frequencies where the filter cutoff is set.
So it basically makes those frequencies, it adds amplitude, so it makes them louder. So, yeah.
So that's why you have to be careful as you're turning that up. You can get it can get hot. Yeah, very squelchy. And again, that's associated a lot with 303 acid music.
Yeah. By the way, if you, at home, if you have any sort of software that, some sort of like frequency spectrum type software that allows you to see frequencies that are present, I would recommend just like throwing a synth in there. Let's just say like you use whatever DAW, throw a synth on that track and turn up the resonance and see where the filter cutoff, how those frequencies start to go up with the amplitude.
Cool.
Yeah. Hot tip.
Pro tip. Life hack. Okay, so now if you go to the envelope amount, also e.g. envelope generator, this section is essentially tied to the envelope section, the black section on the grandmother. So the more that you're turning this up, the more this is affecting the filter.
Yeah, and we'll talk about envelopes right now, so that will actually make sense. I like that pun. This is resonating with me.
Yes,
all about
puns.
synth puns.
I love that. Okay, so attack is the time it takes for the signal to go from 0 to its maximum level.
Okay. So let's just make sure everyone also understands what envelopes are, right?
Oh, okay, sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So again, envelopes shape a signal over time. So what that means, if like you play, and LP is going to demonstrate the different stages of ADSR because that ties into envelopes. But envelope basically is like, all right, I'm going to play a key on a synth. And it's basically like what happens over time as you're playing that key, that note.
Do you want to, it's just hard for me to hold the mic.
You want me to play it?
Yes, okay. So we'll start with attack. If the knob is lowered to the left, so the attack is closed, then it'll hit quickly. It'll be a quick, what we call a quick attack.
So it's like super quick. I'm like hitting the key, you hear sound right away.
And as I turn the knob, as I open it, as I turn it to the right, oh wait, is this in?
I would turn this up.
Oh, here we go.
too, actually.
Okay. There it is. You get to put it on envelope mode, on the VCA mode.
Yeah.
So it took a long time for the sound to get there.
Peak volume.
So I'm going to turn down the attack again to demonstrate decay. And decay is, let me read this so I get this right. The time it takes for the signal to fall from the max level achieved by the attack stage to the sustain level.
So actually, let's talk about sustain level first, because I feel like in order, for you guys to understand what decay is, we got to know what sustain is, right? So there's different types of envelopes that can affect different things. So common things would be, let's say, volume or amplitude or pitch. So again, shaping something over time, shaping like, let's just say you're raising the pitch, like how that's shaped over time, or volume, I feel like is a really easy way to understand envelopes, right? Because like if you think of like a trumpet, you blow air right into the trumpet, it's going to take a certain amount of time before it reaches that peak volume versus like plucking a violin. That sound's going to be pretty instantaneous, right? So again, envelopes shaping something over time. So if we talk about sustain, and we're talking about, let's say, amplitude, volume, then sustain is going to be the volume that, once it goes to peak volume, what its volume it sits at as I'm holding down this key.
And if you raise the sustain all the way up, you're essentially skipping decay because it just reaches that level right away.
Right, so let's turn the sustain. Ooh, okay. So now I'm holding down this key, sustain set at 0, and so now it's at 0. But if we raise it, say, like here,
50%.
so it's getting a little bit quieter, and now it's just sitting at this volume here. So going back to decay.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Right?
Yep.
So decay is the amount of time it's going to take to go from peak volume to the sustain level.
So I'm going to turn it all the way down.
So it's just instantaneous.
All the way up.
There we go. Right? So it took a longer amount of time to get there.
And then release is associated with when you actually release your hand from playing the note, how long the sound takes to release. So basses, for instance, you wouldn't necessarily have a lot of release on it unless you're maybe in the breakdown section of the song. But like pads would have a lot of release on them. Okay. Next slide. Anybody have any questions? I mean, I know that we're a little bit lagged and delayed, but feel free to just like throw them in the chat as we're going through this.
Latency. We live for it. Just
We
kidding.
love it. So VCA, commonly used in synthesis to control volume and for envelope shaping. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that would be this, right? This section.
That section right there.
And so this is on this synthesizer on the grandmother. It's fun because you can have it on envelope, which essentially the notes are shaped by this envelope, which is an amp envelope. And if you go to drone, that would be as if you didn't have an envelope because it's just going to play the sound continuously and there's nothing triggering it or stopping it or, so yeah. Anything else there?
That's
it? Okay.
Yeah. I'm waiting to get to my favorite part.
Modulation?
Yeah.
Mine too.
Makes the sound
work together.
way more exciting.
So modulation adds interest in the form of movement by using sources such as LFOs, low frequency oscillators, and envelopes to modulate parameters such as filter cutoff, pitch, pulse, width. So that is this section. Obviously I'm a house producer, and so a lot of my references are associated with house genres, but to me this section is all tech house right now. This is where this world is living, and you'll see why in a minute.
Yeah.
But essentially Moog calls it modulation. It's also called LFOs because you're using LFO to modulate, because an LFO is so low that we usually can't hear the actual pitch or frequency.
Yeah, so modulation uses a source like an LFO, which can be used to affect something else. And like basically if like you want to wiggle the pitch or make something move, create movement, then
Yes.
yeah.
So I am going to use an LFO. How do I want to demonstrate this? Yes.
I always feel like filter cutoff is a fun thing.
Oh, yeah.
To modulate.
Also an important thing, the mod wheel, if this is turned down, this section won't activate on this synthesizer, so you have to make sure you turn it up. And then, so this is going to be the shape of the LFO. We have the sign here, whereas, we didn't have the sign on the oscillator knobs. But, so let's say you want to use a sine LFO to modulate the pitch at this given rate, wherever you put it. Instant fun. Just gonna put the mic down to get weird for a minute. Told you we'd get weird.
Love getting weird.
That Walker and Royce or Chris Lake drop, and they all have right at the drop. That's sort of what's happening
That
there.
wiggle.
That LFO modulation. Okay. Do we have anything else to cover here? I think we go to the next.
Cool. I think it would be fun to demonstrate some other things that we can modulate. Maybe like, let's see what else we have in terms of options here, right? We can modulate pitch. Oh, you already did that. Cut off. Pulse width, which I guess I already demoed that earlier. It might be hard to hear with all of the other things that are being modulated. There we go. That's cool. Yeah.
So this is the pulse width being modulated.
And we can change different waveforms also, right? For our LFO.
Yep. Let's go to...
Oh, let's talk about... Yeah. No, I'm just like, so for square waves and pulse waves, or square specifically, play that again. So you hear how it sounds like it's like on, off, on, off, on, off. So remember how we said like pulse wave, off 50% of the time, on 50% of the time. What's really cool about this is we can actually hear it.
Sick. Cool. So, mod and pitch wheels. The other things to the pitch wheel on this messes with the pitch, as you'll be here. Let me turn down the modulation stuff. An easy way to add variation to your sounds manually.
Yeah.
And then the ARP section. So I'm going to start in ARP, and I'm going to go the order forward, I guess, sort of up to down in one octave. Hold it. And the arp is going to happen at this rate. And this is going to be a random order of notes that I put it at, this middle one. Now let's add 2 octaves. It's going up, it's hitting 2 full octaves. And now 3 full octaves. I like to add glide to my arps to make them, this can get weird too. So the notes are gliding together.
Nice. Ta-da!
Anything else here?
Cool. Okay, yeah, perfect. I feel like we
Modulate.
I did want to actually note one thing about modulation that we didn't really touch on, because I feel like the easiest way to understand it is the invisible hand concept, where it's like, again, one thing like an LFO is affecting something else, such as filter cutoff or pitch. But basically, like, you're just like, and yeah, you can, since both of these are semi-modular synths, you can technically patch things, so it does that for you, rather than turning up the mod wheel here. But basically, it's like you're telling the synth for one thing to affect another without having to, let's just say, turn this filter cutoff knob manually, right? And you can basically tell it, based upon the rate, how fast or how slow you want it to move, right? So really fast would be like, and using an LFO is really powerful because I physically cannot do that as quickly as LP demonstrated earlier with the LFO, right? Also, I don't have enough time in the day. So yeah, using an LFO is really handy for that. Because again, rather than you having to go like this, it just does it for you without, so you've got all these invisible hands working its magic.
Cool.
I would say, so we can touch on some of these things here. So with like keyboard tracking, I guess the best way to understand that is basically like using, let's say, like filter cutoff here as an example. So it's tracking the keys, meaning that the higher I go up in pitch, the higher I travel up the keyboard, the filter is essentially going to open up. The sound's going to get brighter. So notice how the sounds brighter up here versus down here, which is really, really nice because it adds more expression when you play, which is always the goal, right? And that's the really fun thing about these hardware synths is it gives you so much ability in regards to performance of being able to, create all these variations and forms of expression when you're playing live. Cool, yeah. And the concept of monophonic, polyphonic, paraphonic. Monophonic is essentially the ability to play one note at a time. So we're talking about oscillators, right? So this synth has 4 oscillators. And I'm going to actually set these all to the same waveform.
Whereas my synth is just monophonic. I can only play one note at a time.
Yeah, this thing's crazy. And I'm still honestly trying to understand all the bells and whistles because it's a lot, which I appreciate. And I always love a challenge.
It's a lifetime journey.
It's an amazing instrument, though. There's just like so many capabilities of stereo, just possibilities in general, which is amazing. Which we'll demonstrate sound design in a moment. But yeah, so over here, I can switch to one voice mode, which makes it monophonic. And essentially what that means is each oscillator, right? When I play a note, it's going to play all of these oscillators at the same time. If I were to change the tuning, all of my oscillators are turned down. That's why I was like, what's happening? So mixer section, again, we can adjust the volumes of our oscillators. There we go. So if I change the tuning, you can actually hear all of these oscillators at the same time. If I change the waveforms for each one. And notice how if I try to play more than one note at a time, you get this like funny thing that happens because it will only allow us to play one note at a time. So the really cool thing about monophonic, again, is that we have all of these different oscillators and essentially we can have them play simultaneously and get these like really thick sounds. So using the example of square, right, that we talked about earlier, we can get really juicy, and that like classic Moog beefy sound, right?
Yes, Moog.
Which is really nice. So Paraphony. So here, actually, let's talk about polyphony for a second. Polyphonic. So polyphonic instruments have the ability to play multiple notes simultaneously, and I'm not going to go super in depth between the difference between polyphonic and paraphonic, but essentially it has to do with just signal routing in general. And polyphonic, we've got like multiple copies of this like voices and where things are routed. So, you know, each voice will get its like own filter and VCA. Paraphonic, everything is essentially, all these oscillators are sharing the same signal path, going the same place, like, right, filter section, essentially, eventually VCA section. But on here, so if I switch this to 2-voice mode, I'll have the ability to play 2 notes at a time, and it's going to split up these oscillators per note. So 2 oscillators for each note. So let's see if I can hear this better if I do this. We'll make them the same waveform. Right? And if I try to play, let's say 4, we're not really going to hear the desired effect, but we can play 2 notes at a time. Right? So for voice mode, we can actually then play 4 notes at a time. Which is really, really cool, right? It's like kind of a bit of a rarity with Moog instruments. Typically are monophonic. So Matriarch's really cool because then you've got that flexibility. So actually, do you want to dive into creating some cool sounds?
Why, Lauren? I would love to. I'm going to touch on the modular part of this synthesizer. What's great about, so modular is essentially you can sort of creatively reconstruct the ins and outs of how things flow when creating the sound. You know, you don't just have to go from oscillator to filter to envelope. And what's great about the synth is that it allows you to do that. Not all synths have this modular section, so let's play with it.
Not all synths are created equally.
So I'm going to use an LFO to modulate Oscillator 2. So I'm going to go into the, see.
So remember the concept of invisible hands?
That's what we're going to do here. We're going to take the wave out from the LFO and patch it into the linear FM input on Oscillator 2. Let me make sure Oscillator 2 is turned up. And modulate. So we're essentially frequency modulating Oscillator 2 with the LFO, you know, at this shape, at this rate. So
you get all these like really cool harmonics. They're generated.
Yeah. That's a fun one. And then let's do the sample and hold, and let's send that to the cutoff in of the filter. So essentially I'm going to modulate the filter, the invisible hand, at this rate. So I'm going to like open and close the filter at this rate with this LFO wave shape. Let me just demonstrate. Let me do this one so you can hear. Cool. You can really hear that one really well. The filter has so much to do with carving the sound.
Nice.
Cool.
Bass.
Yeah, okay.
Let's make a bass.
Let's do that. How would I'm going to sync these. Square. Turn these down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, so notice took oscillator section all the way down, pitched it all the way down. Each oscillator square, waveforms, each oscillator. What you modulating? Cutoff? Yes, yes. I'm a big fan of modulating and cutoff. Also, I feel like it'd be fun to add some glide.
So glad you asked.
So we can glide one to the next, make it a bit saucier. Squirrely one. Cool. So I mentioned that this particular synth, Moog Matriarch, has the capacity to play multiple notes at a given time. So it's really nice as we're going to take advantage of that. We're going to make a nice pad, dreamy pad. I'm all about the dreamy sounds. And let's go ahead and I'm going to start the oscillator section. Oscillator section again, great place to start because that's where sound is generated, and we'll go on to shape the sound later on. So I'm gonna set each oscillator to this octave here, and I'm gonna set them all to saw waveforms. And let's see here, I'm going to actually turn down this filter here. And because I want a swirly sound, I'm going to use resonance. I'm gonna increase the resonance, and I'm going to basically manipulate the section, but then also set my parameters for the envelopes because that is going to be super important, but I just kind of like to go this way. So yeah, to get the swirly sound, we're going to increase resonance, and we'll come back to this section here. So we talked about envelopes, right? So on the grandmother, we have the one envelope, right?
The amp envelope.
Yeah. And actually it's affecting filter and amplitude at the same time. Yeah, so certain synths will only have one envelope. It's two birds, one stone, will affect filter section and volume amp at the same time. So this particular synth is cool because we can actually affect amplitude and filter section separately, which is really, really nice because then you get a little bit of flexibility here. So what I'm gonna do is if I'm, let's just say, generating a pad, I want something that's like nice and dreamy. I want this filter to slowly open up, right? Like that. And again, we get the it's kind of not really squelchy, but just that kind of sound because this resonance is turned up here. So what I'm gonna do is, because I want to kind of tell my invisible hand to slowly open this, I want the attack to be a bit longer. Same thing with decay, a little bit of release here. I'm going to have the sustain, meaning that the filter is going to open up to a certain point and just hang out there as I'm holding down these notes. And then I'm going to tweak these amp settings a little bit too. So slightly less attack because I want to be able to play the notes and hear sound pretty much right away. Maybe just a little bit of attack and maybe a little bit of decay. And actually I'm going to increase long decay, long release. It's going to get nicer, I swear. And maybe, let's see. Okay, so what I want to do is, remember LP mentioned that the envelope amount is determining how much the envelope section is going to affect the filter section. So by increasing this envelope amount, ooh, that's nice. Which is really nice. Cool. Let's add some LFO now. I'm going to modulate the filter cutoff. So again, I want the LFO to basically do this kind of thing where it's LFO, by the way, with an envelope. That envelope shape happens when you hold the note down and then you go to play a note again, happens again. With LFO, it's happening repeatedly. And so I basically want this knob to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, over and over again. I'm going to use a sine wave because it's just really nice and smooth. And I'm going to turn up this cutoff amount. Turn up this mod wheel. Woo! But make it like super slow. And to make this even saucier, I'm going to turn this down. By the way, yeah, so this is dual filters, meaning that this has 2 filters. And there's different filter mode settings. My favorite one is stereo. We got 2 low pass filters. And I'm going to turn up, we have the stereo delay section. So if I increase the mix here, woo, change the time, feedback, get this cool spacey sound.
Tame Impala is feeling this.
That's really nice. So dreamy. Oof. I hope everyone's wearing headphones, by the way. You won't really get the full effect stereo-wise. Okay, so what if we want to make this like cute, like little boopy, quirky, arpeggiated sound? I'm a huge fan of just like really weird, quirky sounds. Maybe weird in a different sense of your sense of weird. Mine's like anime, like cute, colorful. Okay, so what I'm gonna do?
Give me the drop.
I'm gonna turn down the delay for a moment. I'm gonna set this back to monophonic, and I'm going to use square waveform. And let's turn it up an octave for each. Actually, to make this fun, let's set maybe the last oscillator to the highest octave. And let's do this. Set the filter cutoff all the way up first. And all right, so what we're gonna do, let's start with the amp envelope here. So I want something that I'm actually gonna turn on the arpeggiator just to kind of, so I can get this. What's really fun with this is I can just turn on play, hold, and I don't have to play anything. I can just be like, boom. I can shape the sound here. So it's like really clicky right now.
Woo.
Right? Set the filter cutoff down. And what I want to do is turn this up. And I'm going to modulate, so the filter cutoff, pitch. I'm going to use maybe square. It might be too short to really fully hear that, but ooh. I kind of like it without sync enable. It's getting weird. It's kind of mallet sounding like. Fun. Cool. So you can see all of the possibilities with sound here. It's like honestly endless.
Endless. And one more thing I want to touch on the grandmother that's really, really cool about this synth is the filter. You can use it as an external filter for other inputs like your computer, or if you wanted to run a different synth through it. There's an in and an out. So I think that's really special about this synth. And also the spring reverb is very, let me just.
Oh yeah. So that synth's
drone.
got spring reverb, this one's got stereo delay. And we can change it.
When I turn off the sound, you can really hear the verb after it. Special.
So special.
You guys,
Alexis is here. That's so nice.
I know, it is so nice.
I feel like we should take some questions.
Yeah, fire them over. It's going to take us a minute. So while we wait to see your questions,
Yeah,
because
I have no idea what the lag is.
The lag is, it's pretty real.
I can
15
Oh,
seconds.
okay. It's kind of funny. We can watch ourselves.
I know, right? I'm going to take an opportunity to plug something very near and dear to our hearts. I talked about this at the beginning, but today we launched FEMME House online courses. So women from all over the world now, not just in Los Angeles, we've already been holding monthly workshops. now we have online courses for women to take and dive deeper into aspects of what Mini Bear has already been teaching.
Yeah, so our first course is Intro to Ableton Live, and that starts June 12th. You can sign up now. It's a month-long course, and yeah, if you go to thisisfemmehouse.com, it'd be really cool if we had a graphic, but you know, the power of Google is super powerful. If you Google This Is FEM House, you will definitely find it. But yeah, I've definitely got a lot of ideas brewing in my head as far as what course content that we want to do next. I would love to do a synthesis one.
Definitely.
It's my passion. Drums is always really fun. Drum programming.
Drum programming, huge.
How to make your drums sound sick.
I'm biased to that.
Yeah.
And thank you to Moog. They've been massive supporters of FEM House from the very, very beginning. We actually did the Art of Synthesis in person before, before the pandemic hit. We did it in Los Angeles, and they supported it and sent us a bunch of synths, and we worked with a few other powerful women to teach this, and so it's really cool that we're able to now do it online. FEM Synth Lab. Yeah,
You're awesome.
So thank you to Moog for caring about spreading the word and visual representation, and thank you to Lauren Kopp for being a beast and knowing everything there is to know about production and music and synthesis. So thank you.
I love constantly learning. I will just say that. But yeah, definitely appreciate Moog. And yeah, as LP mentioned, like honestly, having access to hardware synths is just so special. Because I feel like I didn't really understand synthesis until I was able to stand in front of one where everything was just laid out in a way where like signal pathwise and just like being able to like physically maneuver faders and knobs, the concepts just click. And what's really magical about these things is like even if concepts don't really like click right away, you can still very easily make cool sounds with them. And I feel like they are designed that way. So that's pretty special and pretty magical. Yeah.
100%.
Questions? No questions?
Well, we appreciate everybody watching. We're going to hang out for a few minutes just to make sure we're not missing any, we'll just be tweaking. We'll just be tweaking.
We can just make sounds if you want. Like, honestly, we can just jam. Down for that. For the timing, syncing clocks, I've used the grandmother with an Ableton session on my computer, and there's USB out in it, USB, and so I, set my Ableton USB cable from the grandmother to my computer, and it picks up the clock of the session, and that way the ARP and everything is synced to that. Yeah, we don't have any workshops on the table right now in regards to patching the Matriarch specifically, but be down for that. To be honest, the world of modular is very new to me, but I will say that I've spent some time on here just kind of patching things. So that's a really cool thing about Semi-Modular. It just kind of like allows you to like get your feet wet a little bit with that world. And again, with like this Semi-Modular is like just keep plugging away things, like plugging things in and see what sounds good. But yeah. basically, it's a really step up. Basically makes the course accessible. So first tier, second tier, third tier, fourth tier, basically they're just different prices. So you basically just like choose the tier that you can afford. So yeah, our goal for FEM House is essentially to make learning production, learning these types of things just like accessible to people that, you know, don't normally feel supported learning these types of things. So yeah, so basically like that's why those tiers exist, is like if you can afford the fourth tier, obviously make room for space for those at the bottom tier that can't necessarily afford fourth tier, you know?
We've kept the workshops free in person in LA. And so, you know, it helps pay for gear and the teaching of the workshops in person as well in the community we're building.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we were in space. So yeah, can paraphonic chords be played alongside their polyphonic equivalent? So I'm not specifically sure what you mean by that. I don't know if you mean like other synths that you're playing. But I mean, technically, again, like if you like hear sound, it sounds like, oh, you muted it. That's why I can't hear it. And I'm just going to say that maybe, do you have...
I turned it off and turned it on again.
So just feeding back?
Yeah, it is.
Strange. I mean, I can just speak to this, but basically, yeah. I mean, if you just like hear a sound paraphonic, unless like the really cool thing about this though, is like you will hear, like if you set your oscillators at different octaves and with different waveforms, you will actually hear like if you release the key and play a key, like different, you'll hear like different sounds will be played. So it has like a different, like certain quirk to it. But yeah, if you have like other polyphonic synths, like definitely, I mean, sounds in general, right? Where you just can like add all the sounds together and create an orchestra of cool sounds. Orchestra of synths, my dream, basically. But yeah.
Yep. Okay, guys, I think this is the end of it. Unfortunately, this was so fun. Thank you again to Moog. Please check out FEM House. This is femhouse.com. Thank you to Xander for making all this happen behind the scenes. Thank you to Moog. Thank you to Lauren Kopp / Bear.
Yeah. Thanks, LP. Thank you, Moog. Thank you, Xander.
Thank you to the community that we're building. And it's just been really inspirational to see that people care and that they want to learn. And it just really inspires us.
Yeah. Shout out also to Lo and Sophia.
Yeah. Lauren Spalding and Sophia, they both make this happen as well and work tirelessly behind the scenes. So it's very cool.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much for tuning in. And yeah, have some fun playing synths, making those cool sounds. Yeah, be safe.
Happy Friday.